needing, the influence of New York or L.A. or not accepting it or, not looking for it. This is like, well, the music is just going to reflect what we have here because there's no reason at all for us to try to make it sound anything like what's going on in New York or L.A. Because they're not interested in what we're doing. So, why should we try to satisfy them? Let's just do what we do that sounds like, our environment, our city. I think the music really has grown to reflect that, and no better example of that than DJ Screw, because he moved slow, he talked slow, everything. He didn't do anything fast, and so whereas I think that Houston music was probably always gonna gravitate towards being slower than music from most places. He was the big influence to really hammer that in, and we still see the influence of that today.
Yeah, when you listen to a song like "Do What You Want to Do" of Devin the Jew, you can really feel the Texas feel. Even more, if it's crude, it's crazy.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, DJ Screw got his name from his cousin Shorty Mac. Can you tell us about Screw? And I know it's your next book.
Yeah. My next book. I'm finishing it now. I'm finishing it by the end of the year, and it'll come out in 2021. Screw. There's really, besides the Ghetto Boys, there's really no bigger name. I guess you could say Travis Scott's probably the most well known at the moment. But DJ Screw, grew up in Houston and Smithville, which is a little town in the country, in between Houston and Austin, and he moved to Houston in the late 1980s from Smithville, and really ended up in the right place at the right time and met the right people all at the right moments, because he was a DJ, he was a practicing DJ back home in Smithville, and then when he got to Houston, he was able to get his hands on a lot more records, and he was able to start getting some work DJing, and he was able to start getting some work selling his mixtapes. But it was really when he started collaborating with local artists who weren't even really necessarily rappers yet, but some of them were. But he started having people come over his house and freestyle on the instrumentals that he was playing on his turntables, and he would record those, and he would make personal tapes for people. Eventually, those tapes gravitated to the point where he was slowing the music down, and really kind of stretching out the time in the music, and really got everything into a, just took the music into a different space, and people in Houston just absolutely fell in love with the sound that he was creating, but they also really identified with and were enamored by the artists that were coming to life on his tapes, because those, the artists that were freestyling on his tapes were talking about their neighborhoods, and they were talking about their, they were using their own slang and their own terms and talking about their culture. And so, we talk about, candy paint and swangers and all the kind of different customizations that you can that are made to cars, and a lot of that was, pioneered in Houston. And then we talk about codeine, promethazine, recreational consumption of codeine, promethazine syrup, cough syrup. A lot of that stuff was popularized because people came over to DJ Screw's house and they rapped on tapes and they just talked about that stuff. And so, as the tapes got around, the influence and the culture that was on those tapes spread far and wide. And he was so prolific in his time. He died in November of 2000, but he was so prolific in the years that he was making tapes that there are still tapes being released. There's still stuff coming out. That there's still fresh stuff that we haven't heard from DJ Screw that's out there. So a lot of it's lost, but there are hundreds of tapes that are out there, and so it's really kind of an endless trove of work from someone who slowed his music down and definitely had a sort of slow, druggy feel to it, but was also a really lights out, really good, fast, scratching DJ who had like a really incredible control of the turntables with his hands and his ears. And so, you know, it was an obvious, for me, you know, it was obvious early on when I was working on Houston Rap and Houston Rap tapes. You know, we started those books in 2004, 2005, and by 2008, I was already asking around, like, hey, you know, what if I were to do a book on DJ Screw? You know, it was obvious to me that there needed to be a book about him because, you know, he inspired so many people, and he was responsible for the careers of so many people that we know now, you know, that are part of the hip-hop world at large, or were inspired by and really helped to develop by DJ Screw.
Yeah, and as a person also, he was real humble. He wouldn't know spend no money on for example on shoes or something. He was all on his music, and he was not on money. He was on his circle. He wants others win, and you know, he different from rest of people. That's why he was loved as a person too.
Yeah, he was very loved as a person, and it, you know, I just obviously I've interviewed, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of people for the book, and you know, you always hear different versions of the same story, which is that, you know, he made people feel really special, and he made people feel like they were his best friend, and not only that, but, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, what it was like knowing him when there weren't a lot of people around, but then seeing him, you know, when Ice-T came over his house or something like that, or he was he was backstage with Ice Cube at a big concert or something like that. He was always the same person. You know, everybody tells that story that, you know, he was the same person no matter who you were. He always treated everybody equally, and that, you know, that he would really focus on you and really look into you, and he really wanted to know people and really, really know them. Like, you're not just going to come into my house and rap on this tape. I don't know who you are. Who are you? I want to know you. Come here. Let me look you in your eye. I want you to rap right in front of me. I want to know who you are. I want to see you. I want to see the artist. I want to see that you're real. And, you know, that right there inspired people, and that inspired people to get better at their craft and to become, you know, I think better human beings, just from the stories that they tell me, that you know, Screw was an inspiration to them that made them want to really, really work hard and do what they were, you know, follow their passion. And he still inspires people to do that. He's been dead for almost 20 years, and, you know, there's a record store in Houston that only sells his records, and they're still open. 20 years after his death, they're still open.
Yeah. Aldi was very close to Screw, even back the day when he was young. Sometimes he helped him. He had nothing to eat, so Aldi give him some aid. It was when he was very young, so Aldi was very protege of Screw, also, and also could have clicked too.
Yeah. Well, because they really, you know, they met when they were in high school. And then, you know, immediately Screw starts calling him, you know, he's like, you're my little brother. He started calling him his little brother, and so he called him that until the day he died. And, you know, they really LD developed as a rapper, and Screw developed as a DJ, sort of alongside of each other, because they spent so much time together when they first met. And they really always spent a lot of time together, but especially when they first got together, because, you know, Screw didn't know a whole lot of people in his neighborhoods. You know, and Al was somebody that he just connected with early on, and you know, that so it was you know, like I said, you know, earlier, Screw just really met a lot of the right people at exactly the right time, and, you know, his whole life really was very serendipitous in that way.